just got to unstick him. And you'll notice that there's no drama with pulling at this. I'm just going to pull him back, that's good. So the aim with this is it'll be filled up so it's like a river. And I've got a little, I've been given a casting of a yacht hull, which will sit nicely here. And so when it's finished, the yacht will be sitting on there the whole lot. And it's going to look pretty neat. What we're going to do is use the Lucy Clear. So when you buy a kit with our stuff, you get all the goodies you need to do the job. You get a couple of cups, gloves, tongue depressors. They're really great for mixing. And the important thing you get out of us is very detailed instructions. And there's different technique used for deep pours or large pours to small pours like this. When we do small pours like this, we can get away with speeding up the process and doing it deeper. I could do this in one go if I want, but I want to string it out so I can do a couple of these every day. And you can pour in. You would have seen there it's quite sticky. That's not a problem. First thing I'm going to do while we have a chat is stick this in the microwave and give it a little warm. It's about room temperature. It works really well if your resin's at about 30 degrees C. When you start out, you'll find you'll have less trouble with air bubbles. So I've got a little microwave here that sits in our workshop, and it's got epoxy all over it, but it works really well. So we've set for 15 seconds, and it's a really neat way to warm your resin. A few techniques to warm. You can either stick it in a warm place, if you've got somewhere around your house, to keep it, ideally you want to keep it around 30-35 degrees C, and it becomes very fluid. Not so much this one, but our traditional resin, it's got very much the characteristics of honey. When it's cold, it's thick and gluggy, and you warm it up and it's like water. So the epoxy becomes a lot more fluid as you warm it. But you don't want it too hot, because if you get it too hot, it'll start to yellow off. And if you go too deep and it starts to get too hot, you get what's called exothermic runaway. So if you start to get up towards 40 degrees C, the temperature can just take off on you, and it can shoot up within 2 to 5 minutes to 100 degrees C. And all the disasters you've seen is because of exothermic runaway, where the temperature gets too high and it just takes off, and it cures within a few minutes, but it expands a lot to cure. And as it tries to contract, it cracks and creates all sorts of problems. So that's why you can't use our laminating resin to do a deep pour, because it'd get too hot. You can only layer 3 or 4, maybe 5 mil at a time, and let it sit for a couple of hours before you do your next pour. The Lucy Clear is designed so it's very slow in curing, so it doesn't generate a lot of heat. And ideally, this will sit here 2 to 4 degrees above ambient temperature. We'll even have a look at this. We poured this yesterday. Well, what's our ambient temperature? This is sitting at room temperature. Okay, so it's sitting at room temperature. I expect when we do the pour, we'll come up to somewhere between 22 and 24 degrees C. If you're playing with this in summer and a hot day, don't do it unless you can go into an air-conditioned room. You'll get yourself in all sorts of trouble. So it's been sitting there long enough now. We could have warmed that a little bit more, but it'll do. So it's quite fluid. So what we do, you'll notice we've got plastic all over the table. Whenever you're doing something like this, even with plastic or cardboard, our workbench in the office, we've got cardboard all over the bench, and that gets changed every 2 to 3 weeks. So epoxy will go anywhere if you don't be clean and careful with it. So it's important to clean up after yourself, and even sometimes when we spill epoxy on the bench, we'll cut a small piece of cardboard and put it over the other piece so that you've hidden it, and it'll draw into the cardboard, and it keeps your workspace clean. So we always get in the habit of putting your resin in first, resin first and bring it up to your eye. I'm going to use, what do we use? We used 80 and 40 yesterday. We might go to 150. Let's go. Pour him in. Always stick it up at eye level to make sure you get the right amount in there. Another technique is you can pour into your cup first and then stick it into your microwave. You can use hot water to warm it up. You can buy a heat blanket. There's a few different ways to keep your resin warm. You used to be able to make a hot box with an incandescent light bulb, but you can't get those any longer, can you? Because we shouldn't have incandescent light bulbs. They're no good for you. Anyway, so our hardener, bring him back up to eye level. We'll throw in 50 ml of hardener. Get him at eye level. There we are. Gotcha. Now, you'll notice I'm not in any hurry here. I want to make sure you don't have to work in a, if the phone rings, don't ignore it. You can leave that there and wander away and answer the phone and come back. Or, if someone rocks up on the doorstep, you've got time to even go and have a coffee. And this stuff is very slow reacting. And in actual fact, always put your lids back on. I'll guarantee it'll be all over your bench. It'll be a sticky mess. So, next one, stirring. If you look, there's a whole heap of dispersion lines in there. See all those lines in it? You've got to stir this until you get rid of all those lines. If you've still got those dispersion lines in there, then you've got unmixed product. And it can take, the instructions say, 5 to 6 minutes of stirring. Right? So if you've got the shits with the world and you want to get stuff off your mind, mix up some of this, it'll take it away from you. You'll notice it's gone milky. Right? As I've started to mix, it's gone milky. See all the dispersion lines and that in there? You just got to keep mixing until you get rid of the little beasts. And you keep mixing and you keep mixing. It's already started to come clear, but there's still a lot of dispersion in there. Notice I'm not mixing like I'm baking a cake. If you mix it like you're baking a cake, you're going to end up with something full of air bubbles, and you don't want that. Not that it's a real problem with this stuff. So when we start to get it mixed in, we're starting to get looking pretty good there, but I'll guarantee there's still unmixed stuff around the outside. What you got to do, you got to get your stick flat against your edge in the bottom corner and scrape right around, and that's to take the unmixed stuff off the sides. If you don't do that, there'll be unmixed stuff in the sides and bottom corners. And out of that, I got rid of nearly all the dispersion lines, and they're back in there. Right, that's all the unmixed stuff around the side. And also your mixing stick. Scrape it off. Be religious about it. Right, it's going to save you ending up with a sticky mess. What happens if you don't mix this stuff properly? It'll go rubbery on you, and it's not very nice. Especially when you've done what I did. I put a whole heap of badges into a silicon muffin tray, and I stuffed up the first mix, didn't I? So all these badges are stuck in this horrible rubbery mess. So we're nearly there. Scrape again. Go around your sides. Don't be impatient. It's very important. That's looking pretty good. You want to have a look at that. So, see how it's gone very clear? Right? So it's important you get it nice and clear. But you don't stop with that. Just to play safe until you get the hang of it. If you want to be a smart aleck down the track and take some shortcuts, you could pour from that cup, but don't do it. Because there's a chance there could be unmixed stuff around those edges. So we always take it into a second container, scrape as much as you can out. There we are. Because there's probably unmixed stuff sitting on there too. And then we give him another quick mix. and we mix. And you'll see there's quite a few fine air bubbles in there. Don't let them worry you. Scrape off, flat, not down like that, or you'll leave resin on there, and your edges, and we're ready to pour. I like to pour onto a sloping or vertical surface because that helps break the air bubbles as it's running down into the hole anyway. Plus, the other reason not to, we've got some sticky stuff in there, and if it's not gelled really well, what can happen is the gelled stuff, if it's still quite liquid, it'll rise up through your mix. So by running it down the sides, it helps take the pressure out, whereas if you pour straight in, you can cause it to break away and lift on you. But it's not a major problem. It'll melt back into itself, but it's better if you go onto a vertical surface like this. And if it's your first coat, always pour over the timber. And the reason is that this is Aussie cedar hidden under here, and Aussie cedar is quite porous. By pouring over the top surface from the start, if there's any minute cracks in there that you haven't seen, you're starting to fill those. And if there's air bubbles trapped there when you go to do your next pour, you just get the stick and pull the air bubbles and break them, and you can pour over it and it'll melt back in. If you let it dry, you have to sand it between coats. So this job here, I started doing it at a teacher's training day about 4 weeks ago, where I did a pour, and I then let it cure, and from there I sanded it. A good way to sand is these fellas. You either put it in a drill press or in your electric drill, run around, do it all. It takes the gloss off really easy. And there's a few lumps here, and that's because when I carted it back from Wollongong in the car, I covered it in plastic and sealed it so it couldn't spill all over my car, and the plastic stuck and drew it up. But no drama, you just sand it. You won't see that by the time it's finished. So it'll all blend in and it'll look $1 million. So you can do all sorts of neat stuff with it. The limitless what you can do. You can set badges in there, you can set insects, flowers. If you're going to do flowers and things like that, you've got to dry them first. Make sure they're all dry. So you can do all sorts of neat stuff. Now that technique there is using a dam. This one here, I just cut out the centre and left the ends and used the timber as a dam. So you can do that. And then this stuff will shrink back as it cures. So another reason to layer it is this I filled in 2 goes. So 2 lots, I filled it up and it shrunk back over 2 to 3 mil. I then did a pour and poured with, and I set it up so it was level, used a spirit level and got it level. And I poured so it got a meniscus edge, so it curved up, and let it come to over full, so that as it settled and cured, it shrunk back a little bit, and it was then a proud above the surface. Sanded the whole surface, and then just poured another coat of Lucy Clear over it. It'll pour over the top like that, and you'll get a really nice luster finish. It's not overly durable. It's great for sticking stuff on the wall, or trophies and things like that. But if it scratches, you end up with a white mark. Same with our pour-on gloss. So the ideal way to finish it, if it's got to be durable like a tabletop or something like that, is use our Aquacoat water-based polyurethane over the top. You can also, that fella there, the poly. You can also do a pour-on gloss coat over the top. The one with the gold fleck in it, that's been finished off. Then it had dipped back a little bit. So what we did there is we made a slab router up, and we ran over it with the router and took the top off it, and then did a pour over the top of it. And that's radiata pine. Who would have thought you could make radiata pine look pretty? Yeah, marvellous what you can do. You can do things like the burl. So this fella here, it weighs a tonne. This is a manky old burl I picked up at the timber show a few years ago, and it sat under the bench and thought, what the bloody hell am I going to do with it? I bought it because it was cheap. I think it cost me $20 if that. And it's quite thick. And what I did, we found that this, you can't just wrap duct tape or gaffer tape around it. It'll actually melt it and it'll find its way through. And when I first did one of these, it ended up a sticky mess. What we did, we got some soft plastic and put the soft plastic on, then taped it and took the tape up over the top edge, so it actually rolled over the top edge so it couldn't pull away. Sat it onto a flat surface, and then over 3 to 4 days filled that up. And it took 2 or 3 litres to fill that. But now that's full, you'll be able to put that on a wood lathe, or a metal lathe even, and turn it, and the thing, you won't have bits falling out of it, and you've got all your cavities already filled, so you can turn a really nice featured bowl out of that, or even carve it, whatever you want to do. So you can do all sorts of neat stuff with it. Another technique, if you don't want the high gloss finish over the whole surface, we've found that baking paper doesn't stick to the epoxy. So we've found No More Gaps works really well. So to do this, we run the No More Gaps around the side, ends and side. Just got a couple of put it down on the baking paper, and then clamp down bits of timber on the end, higher than the surface. Duct tape along each side. When we're finished, this has just been sanded back and oiled. So this has only been sanded about 400 grit. If you sand to about 600, you can even bring that up shiny with oil. It'll come up nice and bright. That's only just done with a scour pad, so it needs, if you want it nice and bright, you need to go to between 400 and 600 grit and then oil, so you can oil. You can put the polyurethane direct over it. So there's all sorts of finishes you can do if you don't want to end up with that high gloss see your face finish. Any questions? Thank you. Is
it food safe?
Sorry?
Food safe?
All epoxies are food safe once they're cured. They're plastic. Now, the only time they're not food safe is when you're mixing them and they're drying. And I wouldn't want to be eaten off it while it's wet. So once they're cured, they're inert. Yeah, there's no drama at all.
So you can use it as a chopping board?
Yeah, but I wouldn't want a high gloss finish on a chopping board. Sure, if you got inserts, but remember, on a chopping board application, as soon as the knife hits it, it's going to be a white line. Right, so you need to take that into consideration if you're going to. I personally wouldn't have a feature of this on a chopping board. Sure, a cheese platter or something like that that's going to sit nice in the middle of a table and look quite smart, but not something you're going to be cutting on to any degree.
Could you use the clear system for a chopping board?
No, I'd just oil it. I'd do this and oil it. Yeah, you're better off with oil with things like that. That way it's easier to just get a scour pad or something and give it a light sand, and you can bring the surface back to looking really good. The problem is if you use polyurethanes like that on a chopping board, and I've got the problem at home now. I bought a board up in Thailand 3 or 4 years ago when I was coming back. Polyurethanes aren't waterproof, so over time, and especially when you start to mark it, the moisture is going to get in under the polyurethane and it's going to actually trap bacteria, so you're going to get bits of food and that in there. No, nothing beats oil for a surface like that. Shelf life, indefinite. Very good question. The reason our products have got no shelf life and we install them in plastic is because of the modern technology chemicals used. Most epoxies in the marketplace use old technology of chemicals in the hardener, and they're smaller than the pores of your skin, so they'll readily go in through your skin. They readily vaporise, so you can smell them. You can't smell this. The technology in this is very, very low vapour pressure, so you've got to heat it well over 60 degrees C before you'll start to smell it. And it won't. The the molecules larger than the pores of your skin. Therefore, you can store it in plastic, it won't go off. Whereas the old technology stuff, you can't store it. Well, if you do store it in plastic, and quite a few of them sell it in plastic bottles because it's cheaper to store in plastic, that's why it's got a shelf life, because the molecules leach through the plastic, and quite often, if you put those products into a closed container and open the lid, you get that ammonia smell when you open the lid. It's because they're old technology chemicals. Don't use them, they're no good for your health. All this product range here is based on modern technology out of Germany. It's a lot safer to use. Lot safer to use. And if you hop on our YouTube channel, you can have a good laugh, because I did a video with a bloke called Alf. He started building boats when he was 14 with his father. He got to the stage from using old technology epoxy that he spent 2 weeks in bed. And the doctor said, you go back near that stuff, we'll put you in a coffin, and it affected his central nervous system. And it's accumulative, it doesn't go away. Once you become hypersensitive, you're hypersensitive for life. And anyway, he was using our single pack polyurethane to build these traditional 10-foot boats, and we wanted to go and have a look and see how he was getting the success, because you've got to clamp that really tight and no gap to get good adhesion. And we went up, and he got me to take up a small kit of epoxy glue to glue some fittings on the gunnel, he supposedly his son was going to do it. Based on me saying it was safer to use, he ended up using it. The old bugger's now using it without gloves. That's how much safer it is. If he went and used old technology stuff, he'd be down for ages, if not in a coffin. Yet he can safely use ours.
Can you colour it?
Yeah, we've got a whole pile of coloured pigments. We're working on getting metal stuff. We haven't quite got that yet. We've got copper. We've got plenty of copper, but we've got to get hold of the other colours and metallics at this stage. Yeah, and when you use pigments, you're better off using liquid pigments than powders, or people use oxide for colouring for concrete. Oxides. It's bloody horrible in epoxy, because it makes the epoxy a lot harder to sand, because you're putting actual metal in there, stone in there. And the other thing is, when you sand it loses that white colour, and you put another coating over it, it won't come back. Ours, like this fella here, that was just the end of a paddle pop stick. Sorry, a tongue depressor, and it went too dark. I wanted it a lot more opaque than what it is. So that's the blue. We've got a bit of metal flake in there as well. Yeah. All right, thank you everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Woo!